Jim Merritt, I guess, would be the guy.
Pull the title screen off for us. And we are live. Hey everybody, welcome to my house. This is our remote studio away from home. Tom Britt with the Geist magazine. It's a special edition of our Facebook Live. And today we're talking about the Conservancy District and all the talk and rumors and activity that's happened around this over the last couple of weeks has been crazy. So I invited the organizers of this initiative to come to the house and just kind of set the record straight, but also get everybody educated as to what is actually happening. So I have with us Mr. Matt Troyer. Matt's been the attorney kind of leading the charge on the legal side, and he's also a Geist resident, lives out in Cambridge, so thank you, Matt. Also Pete Peterson, he's our district representative on the city council for Fishers, and Pete's was involved in the annexation fight way back in the day, and now he's city councilman, and he's got a few things to say about the CD as well. Brian Hall, no introduction needed. Brian's the president of the Geist Lake Coalition, and he's been leading the charge from the volunteer perspective and from the Geist Lake Coalition side. So thank you, Brian. You got an MBA in this whole course in the last couple of years, haven't you? Today's your graduation.
Quite an education.
And also, of course, the mayor of Fishers, Mr. Scott Fadness, joined us as well. And Scott has been an advocate for the Conservancy District and actually testified on behalf of it a few weeks ago. So thanks, Scott, for coming out. I know you've been out shaking babies and kissing hands.
It's a busy time of year, yeah, absolutely, but I'm glad to be here.
Putting out signs and volunteering for Volunteer Day, cleaning up the city. But it's an important topic. Just so you know, we are streaming this live on Facebook, so if you're watching us live, feel free to leave a comment or a question. And we've got a couple guys from the live stream guys here streaming us and monitoring the chatter through Facebook. And if the feed drops for some reason, I notice the feed will kind of come in and out a little bit here and there. Just hang with it, it'll come back. We're on Verizon, so sometimes the feed will come in and out. Any ground rules today? Really, the only ground rules are we want to answer as many questions as possible. And I think the best way to start talking about the Conservancy District is just talk about Geist in general. You know, Geist Reservoir was finished in 1943. It's over 75 years old. And there's been numerous problems with the lake of late, and I would say of the last 10 to 15 years. You guys probably remember the blue-green algae scare back about 2012 or so, 2010. We've also had the milfoil crisis. And over the course of all of that has also been other problems happening within the lake. Over Scott's shoulder on the wall, you can't really see it that well in the feed, but there's an old map of Geist Reservoir here in our den. And that map was done in 1953 to 1955. We're not exactly sure when it was, but it's the first map done by the Indianapolis Water Company. It had the sailing club on it, but not the yacht club. So we kind of know that it's sometime after 53 and before 57. But if you look at the north end of the lake, it's a fishing map. So it has the water depths of Geist Reservoir. And the north end was from 7 to 11 feet deep on the north end of the lake. And if you guys have been on Oleo Road Bridge, if you've been at the Geist Half and started the Geist Half Marathon, you saw to the left, to the east, there's a lot of plant life growing in there. I don't think that plant life is 7 feet tall. So sediment load into the lake is probably the biggest unseen problem that we have to deal with. And so, you know, Matt, I'll talk to you. Why a conservancy, or what is a conservancy district? Why did this conversation come up to begin with? And how can this maybe help our problem?
Sure, Tom. Thanks. Yeah, the idea of a conservancy district is an idea that Brian and I and the mayor first started talking about several years ago. The genesis of it was after living on the lake for several years and every year having some kind of an issue, some kind of a mini crisis come out as the crises that Tom was talking about. Brian and some others from the coalition were out at a neighborhood meeting talking about Eurasian milfoil and how to treat it, because that particular summer, if you looked across the lake, you could darn near walk across many of the coves. I live in the Cambridge neighborhood, and many of the coves out there you could darn near walk across. You certainly couldn't boat across them. And Brian educated many of us about the age of the lake, and we started thinking, how can we solve these problems? Brian was going door to door at that stage, asking for contributions and having some success. And in the course of that, we stumbled across the that Lake Lemon, a lake of similar age down down south of Bloomington, had formed a conservancy district maybe 20 years prior to that at that time. And the mayor, whose wife at that time his current wife, his wife, only had one wife, just to be clear. Anna had actually worked when the two of them were getting grad degrees at IU for the Lake Lemon Conservancy District. And so the triangulation of the three of us started talking about a conservancy district as a potential solution among lots of other potential solutions to fund the maintenance and repair and improvement of an asset. And that's how we got started talking about conservancy districts.
And when you guys talked to Lake Lemon and you saw their model down there, and actually I went down and interviewed the guy and we did a story about it, which is actually on the Geist Reservoir Facebook page. Did any lights go off in your head or bells go off and say, ding, 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 we could do this at Geist too?
Yeah, I think as Matt touched on, we have an asset out there in Geist Reservoir, but it's an asset that isn't maintained by any one particular jurisdiction. You know, Geist Reservoir is actually owned by a utility. You have Indianapolis, Fishers, Hancock County, all has a part of it. Then you have IDEM, DNR, Army Corps. Everybody out there has a little piece of it, but nobody can ensure the overall maintenance for the long term. And so one of the things that I think a conservancy district contemplates is long-term sustainability. How do we ensure that we have the resources we need to take care of this asset for the long term? And so when we saw what Lake Lemon was doing and the opportunities to really address the issues that we care about, that the residents around the reservoir care about, we thought that this might very well be a solution that is really sustainable for the long term.
And Brian, you've been cheerleading the GLC and leading the GLC, the Geist Lake Coalition, for years. When you heard about the Conservancy District, and you probably heard it before I even did you see that as a potential answer to some of these problems that we have?
Absolutely. I definitely saw it as a potential. We have a lot of problems out here to address, and going door to door and raising $400,000, $500,000 a year was a drop in the bucket for what we needed to do, and what we were able to do with it was just a Band-Aid. Right. We need to get to the source of the problem, to the root of the problem.
Because our problem isn't just weeds, you know, it's not just treating the water. We got some bigger problems.
Exactly. We need to get to the root of those problems, and hopefully we can reduce the amount of treatment that we're doing, not increase it. Right. And that's our long-term goal. There's a lot of sediment load coming into the reservoir from upstream and the watershed, and that's coming in heavy from a lot of areas, but worse is the area that you spoke of on your map, where it's really lost its depth. To the point where you're 1-2 feet deep up there at best. Mm-hmm. And so we need to get upstream into Thorpe Creek, upstream into Fall Creek, do some stream bank remediation, set up some clean out basins, catch basins, and clean them out and keep them cleaned out on a regular basis. And then we've got dredging around the reservoir that needs to be done too. A lot of homeowners can't get out of their docks.
Right. And Pete, I guess, from a city's perspective, we heard from Scott, you know, no one entity actually owns this problem. When you're out there talking to residents, because this is your district, this is your home district, you live up there close to the lake, what kinds of problems are you hearing from the residents as far as just lake issues that they have as a casual boater and fisherman and all that?
Well, I think there's been a lot of confusion over where the ownership really lies. Right. I mean, that's probably most of it, which you get. You're hearing, you know, well, why doesn't Fishers take care of it? Why doesn't so-and-so take care of it? Why doesn't, you know, we went through the annexation fight and you know, I know a lot of people through that. So a lot of people have a tendency to come to me and ask those questions. And they're very complex, difficult questions to always ask or answer, rather. And I think this particular solution with the Conservancy District is a really good way to try to get your arms around it from the citizen basis. From my perspective, serving the citizens of Geist and the citizens of Fishers, I think it's an excellent opportunity to say the citizens want to start taking care of their asset, right? So from that perspective, you know, I'll support the citizens' actions and want to do that. Right. It also is going to put that control back in the citizens' hands.
So from your perspective, I mean, are you hearing people concerned about the lake dying and their property values being affected by that at all, or are they not really conscious of that yet?
whether the lake goes toxic or whether the lake continues to degrade, whether the safety on the lake and everything else that goes along with that is a major concern for these residents. And as it relates to the city of Fishers, the city of Fishers is a very well-off community, but Geist in and of itself is a huge portion of really that kind of overall net assessed value tax base for the city. So it's a big concern for us, obviously, to make sure that we're maintaining that.
Tom, you brought up a point. I think it's really important to clarify this ownership conversation, because this always comes out when we start discussing this. Geist Reservoir itself is owned by Citizens Energy. The water itself, the land there is owned by Citizens Energy. It happens to be, a portion of it happens to be in the city of Fishers, just like if you're a Fishers resident, your property resides in the city of Fishers, yet you own that property. Now, when we talk about who should own these issues, when it comes to citizens' perspective, they are a water utility, and so their number one issue is whether or not they have enough quality water to serve the residents of central Indiana for the future from a drinking and consumption perspective. And that's what their rates are based on, and they have to answer to all their ratepayers, just like the city has to answer to all of its taxpayers. Now, when we start talking about the issues that the homeowners have around the lake from a recreational perspective, that's a different conversation about how you meet and accomplish those goals. But those goals have a direct impact on all the homeowners, home values and things of that nature. And so that's why this Geist Conservancy District conversation happens, is because not only is the ownership of the lake different in the sense, but the problems that we're trying to address are specific to the people that live in that general area. And I think that's an important, we always get into these conversations and finger pointing starts, well, why don't you take care of this? Why don't you take care of this? When in reality, we need to parse out who owns it, but then we also need to think about what are the problems we're trying to solve and who do those most directly benefit.
Right. And speak to the Conservancy District. So give us a primer, if you will, on how a Conservancy District is formed, and then what happens with the money.
Sure, Tom, and thanks, Scott. Too first of all, in the state of Indiana, there are approximately 96 active conservancy districts. They are formed for lots of different purposes. Recreation is one of those. We've already mentioned Lake Lemon as probably being the closest analog. There's another conservancy district, a recreation-based one around Sweetwater Cordery, and there's a dozen or two that have recreation as one of their purposes. So a conservancy district is a local governmental unit that is formed by filing a petition with the county court. That petition has to have a certain number of signatures. The current effort, we have approximately double the number of required signatures. From there, the petition gets sent up to the Natural Resources Commission, and the Natural Resources Commission attempts to, at a high level, make a value judgment about whether or not the likely benefits of forming the Conservancy District will outweigh the costs. And as part of that, an initial board, a governing board is appointed. That it's worthwhile to note that after that board is appointed and the CD is enacted, then that board is an elected body. In this particular Conservancy District, we have proposed the maximum number of board seats, 9 under state law, so that there is the greatest possible amount of representation of the homeowners. And we've literally just gone around the lake and had roughly equal numbers in population numbers of people in each district. So there'll be 9 districts. All of those will be elected officials. And then long term, that elected board will decide what the priorities of the Conservancy District are, how to best tackle the problems that Brian's group, the GLC, has been attempting to tackle and identifying over the last 20 years, and some of the issues that the mayor and Pete and Tom have also spoken about.
I think, Matt, this is a good point to kind of bifurcate or talk about the difference. Even though Councilmember Peterson and I are here today, this entity has no connection or control by the city of Fishers. This is, if citizens choose to do this in this area, they will appoint their individuals, they will elect them ultimately, and the city of Fishers has no control or authority over this group. And so I want to make sure that people understand that if you're a Geist resident, this is very much your Conservancy District, not the city of Fishers, not the city of Indianapolis, but it's truly represented by the people that live in that area. The reason, Councilmember Peterson, I don't want to speak for him, but the reason we support this opportunity is that if residents want to pursue something like this, we feel like they should have the right to go pursue it to ensure the long-term sustainability of this asset.
And talk about, so we've heard of that. What about the Geist Lake Coalition? What's their role going forward? Because I think a lot of people think that the GLCs is going to run this Conservancy District. So what's your role there?
Absolutely not. We hope to disband, quite honestly.
Ready to pass the torch?
We're ready to pass the torch. We're wore out. Yeah. But we not only will not be involved, but I just wanted to underscore that those that will be the 9 elected officials within the district will actually be residents in the district. Right. So they will be making the decisions best suited for the community as a whole.
And what about what happens to the money? So it's going to collect all this money, but where does that money go? And kind of at a high level, what's the plan for the revenues that come in? What are you going to do with it?
Well, we'll identify through engineering study, which we have been doing. We have hired an engineering firm to identify the problems so that we have a roadmap going forward, and we can prioritize the issues and spend the money, if you will, towards the most impactful problems, make the most impact with the biggest problem. And with that, it would be dredging, as I spoke of earlier. It could be stream bank remediation. It can be buoy control for shoreline buoy, as well as buoys for safety. We can immediately start dredging in the most problematic areas and those that are causing concern for safety. So we can address safety issues, and we can also run a treatment program. Right. So it's really just focused on that. And I'd also like to see a bilge clean out station at the ramp so that the transient boater, when they come in, they can clean out the bilge and get rid of invasive species as well as invasive plant before they bilge it into the reservoir.
I think Marianne asked in our comments earlier, are we going to do something with boat safety and the markers and all that stuff? So you address that.
Absolutely.
It's almost like the weed stuff has been kind of the surface things you've been dealing with, and it takes a lot of money and effort just to handle that. But that's, like you said, it's only hitting the cosmetic stuff. The real problem underneath, the dredging problem, the remediation of the water coming in, that's the bigger issue, is it not?
Absolutely. The weeds and the algae are one thing. If we can't control the algae and we have a toxic bloom like we've had, and it goes toxic, then the lake shuts down, and no one's allowed to fish, no one's allowed to swim. So it's a bigger issue. But it's not so much the aquatic weed. I know a lot of the fishermen are concerned about the aquatic weeds, and that they think that we're trying to eradicate all the weeds in the reservoir. That's not the case. We're treating less than 20% of the reservoir for the weeds, and we don't want to make a swimming pool out of it. Right. We want an ecological balance, healthy balance for the fish, for the fishermen, and for those that recreate.
And speaking of the fish, I got to address this real quick. Fish kill 2 weeks ago was in the news. Indy Star had a story about it. A lot of fishermen are sending me things about this. What happened with that? Where did that end?
Well, it ended with DNR coming out to the reservoir and saying that they could find about 10 to 15 fish. It wasn't that large of a kill. We've typically had some large kills after tough winters. Right. It happens. It's the course of nature. The weak fish don't make it, and there was a lot of indication or a lot of insinuation that we were responsible for the kill because of our treatment program, and it couldn't have been farther from the truth. Yeah. And DNR also indicated that.
I think, Tom, this is a great example of why things like these conservancy districts exist. So let's assume at some point Brian here just gets tired and no longer wants to run Geist Lake Coalition as a nonprofit. When things like a broken buoy comes up, or a concern of safety out on the water, or let's say a fish kill comes up, who is it that these people who are concerned about these issues, where do they take that concern today, and where are they going to take that concern in the future, where we have staff and resources and the availability to address those problems?
Right.
I mean, thank goodness we've had a group of residents that have tirelessly went out and done this from just out of the sake of realizing something needed to get done. But the long-term sustainability of that is what this conversation is really about. To the simple things like there's a broken buoy that marks a dangerous spot in the water, who's going to fix that? To a fish kill, and then to the broader issues of capital improvements. Without that, I'm not sure what the alternative solution is to the sustainable management of this particular asset.
It's a good point. One of the things that's come up a lot recently, and it was used in a couple emails that went out from some other parties, this whole idea of eminent domain. And Matt, since you're the legal expert on the panel, what is eminent domain, and is this something that the CD here in Geist has been asking for, and that's part of this legislation? I mean, what is eminent domain, and how's that impacting this?
Sure, Tom. Eminent domain is the power of all governmental bodies, essentially, to take property for a valid public use, and in doing so, they must pay just compensation. As I started to indicate, virtually every governmental body has that power. I'm not sure why that has come up in some of the literature from some people who are opposed to this. But this is not a power that this CD has asked for. This is a power that exists in state statute broadly. In the statute that's going through the House right now, you have two bodies that have eminent domain power. You have a CD and you have citizens, and there is merely legislation clarifying in those two bodies' instance who has the power of eminent domain over whose property. And so in this case, we have clarified that this recreational-based CD would not have the power of eminent domain over the public utility, citizens' water utility in this case. Just matter to clarify that. If you go back there, from time to time have been court cases in the state of Indiana when you might have a city like the city of Fishers or some city like that and a utility where you have two different bodies that both have eminent domain power. So I think there's been some misinformation about that.
And so just to clarify what you're saying, this is not something that the Geist Conservancy District is asking for. It's already part of the other 90-some CDs.
That's correct.
And the only reason it came up in this instance is because you have two entities, Citizens Energy and potentially the CD of Geist, that would have the same power. So you're trying to work it out now before it ever gets approved as to who has eminent domain over the other.
Yeah, that's correct, Tom.
Okay. So that's why it came up. Now, this House bill as well, everybody's been talking about, one of the things that people have said online is, if this thing passes, then the Conservancy District is going to be enforced, and July 1st you're going to be paying more in fees.
That's also incorrect. The House bill, again, is a bill that was that had some legislation between the CD, the putative CD, and Citizens to get Citizens, again, as the organization that's running the public water utility, comfortable with how this would operate, since you'd have these two, I wouldn't say competing uses, but you have these two different uses of the same body of water. And so that House bill, pardon me, interrupted. That House bill has nothing to do with the normal statutory process of a CD, which this CD would have to go through the same statutory process that every other CD has to go through.
So explain that. So what's the process? You've got the signatures now. You've got
so we got the signatures. We're ready to file a petition and kick that off, and the process will go like I sort of described at the top of the conversation, where we file with the county courts, prepare a plan. It gets reviewed, and there's input by the Natural Resources Commission, and ultimately the Natural Resources Commission, by reviewing that plan and the engineering studies that Brian and the group have put together, will make a value judgment about whether or not those benefits outweigh those costs.
And just at a high level, nobody's going to hold you to this, but if you had a crystal ball, when would something like this happen? Is it going to happen this summer, this winter?
It's not going to happen this summer. These CDs take anywhere between 12 and 48 months to come to fruition.
Okay, so we got a little bit of time.
Correct.
Okay, so that's why we're here today. Another thing that's been happening, this is all on the Facebook Facebook sphere, I'll say, in the chatter on Facebook is, I think a lot of fishermen are concerned you're trying to make this a private lake. Talk to that, Brian, because you've been treating weeds and you've been out there firsthand with this. Is that really the idea here, to get the fishermen off the lake?
Absolutely not. I like to fish. A lot of us like to fish. If I'm not mistaken, the mayor likes to fish. So no, we're not trying to get rid of the fishermen. This is a public lake. Even though Citizens Energy owns it, it's waters of the state. Mm-hmm. That's the last thing from our mind, is to try to get rid of fishermen or any other visitor that brings their boat out here. We just want to make certain that everybody that uses the water, whether they're a resident around Geist, whether they would be in the district or out, or whether they're a transient boater or fisherman, to help with those costs. Right. As all users, that's where this user fee comes into play.
So right now, currently, ballpark, who's paying all the fees right now to clean up the lake?
The homeowners that are contributing. We're going door to door, and they're voluntarily writing checks to help maintain the reservoir. Okay. It's not the transient boater. The transient boater doesn't pay a dime. Those outside the district that come and visit here, there's a misperception that the launch fee to launch the boat at the ramp, that those fees actually go towards the coalition or go towards the cleanup of the reservoir. They don't. That's a private entity that's running that ramp under agreement with Citizens Energy. We see no money from that.
Does DNR get any of that money?
No, sir.
Okay. So in the proposed CD, who's going to pay for the cleanup? I mean, who's going to be responsible then going forward for the revenues? Homeowners? Is it users? I mean, how's that mix?
As far as the responsibility, it's going to be basically about 50% of the proposed budget would come from those within the district, mm-hmm. and 50% would also come from the ramp fee, or not the ramp fee, I'm sorry, from the boat sticker. And that boat sticker is both in the district, the residents in the district will also pay, along with the transient boater outside the district.
So people, if they want to put a boat in Geist, they have to buy an annual permit, a one-time fee per year.
Correct. And
then they'll have to pay, if there's a launch fee, they have to pay that as well to get into the lake each time.
Correct.
If you live on the lake and you've already got a dock, you're going to be paying an assessment on your house as part of the property tax. Correct. But you're also going to be paying a boat fee as well.
Absolutely.
And under the proposal, just to make it clear, you're proposing that a person that lives on Geist, who's already paying property taxes, should pay less for that boat permit than a person who's a transient boater, somebody who doesn't live on the lake.
Correct, because they're paying not only for their property taxes, but they're also paying for their boat sticker. And they may also have multiple motorized craft. They could have a couple of jet skis, so they would also pay a boat sticker for that as well.
Right. And so talk about, I guess, make the argument, and this is something for all of you, I guess, but if I don't live on the lake, I don't live on the lake now. We're about $350,000 away from the water, but we live in Windjammer. We live across the street from the lake, okay? So we're not in the CD. Only the ones that were touching the water were involved. But let's say I'm in the CD. I live in Feather Cove 1. I live off Courageous Drive, and I don't live anywhere close to the lake. Why should I be paying more in this tax? And actually, let me rephrase it. How much am I going to have to pay? And then why should I care about that? Why should I pay?
Well, you should care because even though you aren't on the water, you're living in a lake community. Likely that you came out this way, all the way out to Geist, to live out this way, on or off the water, because you wanted to be near the water. You wanted to recreate on the water. You wanted to have the benefits of living in a lake community. And as a result of living in a lake community, there are benefits to that. And one of them is increased property value. So if the lake goes toxic and we continue to have these algae blooms, then you're going to be impacted just as much as anyone on the water relative to the value of your home.
Right. And just, I guess, Matt, fees, if I have a house that's worth, we'll say it's worth $350,000 assessed value, what would I pay a year roughly?
Sure, Tom. Under the proposed plan, which I believe is on Brian's group's website, it's around $100.
Okay. And if I have a $500,000 house?
It just kind of goes up there, up from there, up to maybe $1 million house. The assessment portion of it, not related to boats, is still below $500.
Okay. So they'll pay that every year, and that's going to be from the user, or from the homeowners will be paying into that.
That's correct.
And 100% of that money stays in the district?
All of it stays in the district.
So it doesn't go to federal government, it doesn't go to build walls, doesn't go anywhere else. It all stays right here.
Correct.
So when somebody says, this is a unjust or undue tax at the local level, which is something that was commented on our page, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I just have a quick response to that. These guys may have their own as well, but there's a lot of ways to look at this. Brian talked about property values. There goes the lake, or there goes the lakefront neighborhoods, and I think that's true. You could also look at the lake. In my own neighborhood, we have a lot of common area, and you can enjoy looking at the lake from that common area. And if you live in a different neighborhood, they may have different neighborhood amenities. And this is a neighborhood amenity for this lake. Right. So that is the primary, one of the justifications anyway.
So just by, I guess, nod of head, you guys all move here because of the lake?
Yeah, absolutely.
I did.
I mean, you could have lived anywhere, right?
Correct.
I know you could have lived anywhere. You've been all over the country.
I have been all over the country.
But you lived in Geist.
I moved here just for the annexation fight, Tom. That's why I moved here.
We recruited you, and you just ended up staying. So I'm going to get to some of these questions. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just wanted to address a couple of things. One, it's kind of interesting we talk on and off the water, because the gentleman over here to Tom's left, who's spent 20 years, if you will, doing the best he can for this lake, doesn't live on the lake, which is, I think, always Brian doesn't even get enough credit for that.
No.
But he does it for the right reasons. He does it because he knows that this lake is an invaluable asset out here for these communities. I also wanted to touch just briefly also on the in-district and out-of-district user fee differential. That model is not dissimilar than Lake Lemon. It's also not dissimilar than how we charge for lots of resource utilization. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, from things as broad as college tuition, where our state-supported organizations, you pay less to attend Indiana University if you're also a taxpayer. You also pay, similarly, if you want to go hunt in the state of Indiana or fish, you pay less if you're an Indiana resident, because you also pay taxes as an Indiana resident than if you wanted to hunt in our state if you came from out of the state. There's a bit of I think, a misperception that somehow the out-of-district boater would pay more money. That is almost impossible to happen.
It's actually quite the opposite. People think that it's someone penalizing someone who doesn't live within the district, but in reality, it's in recognition of the fact that the people that live in the district have already paid through their assessments a certain amount of dollars.
So I just realized something. If I get a boat and I go launch it down there, I'm going to have to buy the higher dollar sticker, aren't I?
That's correct, Tom.
I'm against this already. I'm against it already. This is way too close to home. Okay, so we do have a couple questions. So this is your time to ask questions through Facebook. We're just going to take a couple questions. We already kept these guys way too long. One guy wants to know how much money will go to pay the salaries of the coalition committee. You want to take that one?
Let's see. I'd love to take that one. There are no salaries.
You're going to get double what you've been paid so far.
Because I'm in the hole. None of us are paid. We're all volunteers. And as a matter of fact, I've been paying dearly out of my pocket for many, many years.
I know.
Whether that be
just your time,
my talent, treasure, offering my services. None of us on the board and we're all volunteers. So
I guess another way to ask this question, because I think Steve maybe meant to say, when you have a CD, there was a $125,000 administration fee or something in there. So is the goal to hire somebody full-time to run the CD?
I hope they're planning on hiring somebody full-time. Absolutely. They can have part-timers. They can have a full-time lake manager, much like the gentleman that ran Lake Lemon. They can choose to buy their own dredging equipment, or they can hire a dredging company to come out. They can do it several different ways.
And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. Part of this is that now you're a quasi-governmental taxing unit. Mm-hmm. So you have to go by the laws and regulations of the state of Indiana, correct, and you will have to report back to those units to say what you're collecting and what it's going for, and absolutely, it's going to be auditable, and everything else is going to go on from that perspective, which is really why I think it's a great idea from the perspective of, if the citizens want to do that, right? Because there's so much accountability which is going to come from this.
Right. That's actually absolutely correct, Pete.
Right. And so I guess another thing to ask you, Brian, I think that there's a huge misconception that you're going to be running the Conservancy District. Are you going to run for that office, or?
Absolutely not. I'm going to run from it.
That was a mic drop.
So you're crazy, but not that. You're not that crazy. I get it.
I'm trying to keep my marriage intact right now.
Susan Ross asked, "How will this impact the businesses on the lake?" I guess she's talking about the marina, maybe the people close to the lake. Who wants to take that one?
Scott or?
Well, I would look at it in probably two different ways. So from the revenue collection side, there'd be an assessment on the property there, and depending upon whether you're leasing the property and you pay the taxes, it all depends on kind of your real estate arrangement as to whether you pay the taxes or not. But you would assume there'd be something to that effect. On the flip side of that, I would say if things are starting to be maintained at a higher level, if the recreational quality on the lake changes, if the Geist Conservancy District has the ability to do programming and things of that nature, you would hope that you would see again kind of this rebirth, revitalization of the asset, which means more traffic and more energy and more excitement around the water.
Another question that Tim Huser just asked, will non-residents who pay their fees, so I guess it would be somebody like me who pays for my $250 boat sticker, get a chance to vote on issues, or will the 9 board members make all the decisions?
I'll let you take that one, Matt.
Sure. Yeah, no, the CD board members that decide how the CD is run and operated, and fees are set.
But I would think people with stickers might have influence on those people, or at least talk to them, and feel free to call the board members and talk to the CD chair or whoever this person is running it. Lake manager. Yeah.
Or if they're in their district, run for office. If they don't like how it's being ran or they're concerned about it, they should step up and run for office.
Here's a question I've gotten a lot, and this is about the formation of the Conservancy District. People are asking, this is Sandra Richard asking, will the board members be selected, nominated, or voted on? And we've mentioned that they're going to be appointed and then have elections. Talk through that, Matt. How does that process work?
Sure. After the initial appointment as part of this NRC approval process, then they are elected, I believe, every 4 years, just like other local elected officials.
I think the clarifying point here, Matt, is the bodies that actually appoint that first round. Yes. Is that not the county commissioners?
That's correct. Hamilton County.
So there are elected officials that would be making the decision on who that first round of appointments are, and then you would be up for election. So there's still an accountability process that you would go through where you could reach out to your county commissioners and express your opinions on who should or should not be appointed on that first round.
That's correct.
Which is for 1 year, correct? The first
it's
year.
Until the next election. It's part of the normal municipal cycle.
Oh, the municipal. So they get to run like one election like you did, Scott, and then run again a year later?
Yeah, absolutely.
Basically, that's what happened with you, too. Yeah, doing another victory lap. Somebody asked about eminent domain. They're asking about how fees are determined, what keeps them from escalating uncontrolled. So what's going to keep the fees, you're proposing a $2 million budget. What's going to keep those fees from escalating out of control, that you guys could just come all this power and quadruple our property taxes?
Well, it's basically going to be controlled by the residents within the district that are on the board. They are not going to impose an unrealistic tax increase on themselves. So they're going to keep it in check. And if they don't, they've got to report to the homeowners when it comes to election time. So I think it's going to be controlled naturally.
John Price asked, did you meet the required percentage for each county to be a part of the Conservancy? So Marion and Hamilton counties, did you guys get enough signatures in both counties?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that answered that question. I think this is a really good place to end this stream. We've been going a little bit longer than a half hour than I promised you guys. But I think we answered a lot of the questions, so I thank you guys for all your advice and all your information. My recommendation is to like the Geist Reservoir page. This is now the new home of the Geist Conservancy District, as we're going to put the information out there that's correct. We're going to put out there the things as they're happening in the State House. We'll put out things as they're happening related to the Conservancy District. And if you have questions, you also can message us through that page. Just hit the message button. We have some folks watching that, so we're getting back to people. We do answer every question. Unless it's just crazy, then we just kind of block you. No, we don't block anybody, but we answer every question. And sometimes those questions you can ask them personally, or you just ask them on the page, and we'll take care of those. But I want to thank you guys for all your time you've put into this already, especially Matt and Brian. You guys have been door-to-door HOA meetings, getting those signatures. So wonderful job. Thank you so much for giving us hope and giving us an opportunity for this. And I hope you guys, I hope the residents here of Geist will see this is an opportunity. This is not it's a tax. Yeah, you can call it the tax. But to have an opportunity to have control over your own lake and for its upkeep, I look at it as lake insurance. I'll gladly pay. And actually I had a neighbor across the street come over earlier today and help me mow my grass. And he asked about the Conservancy District. He says, well, are we in it? And I said, no, we're not in it because we don't have any lakefront property. He goes, well, I'd pay to be in that. So I think most residents feel that way. So if you feel like you're the minority, just jump over to the Geist Reservoir Facebook page and we'll welcome you into the family of the Geist Lake Conservancy. You guys have a great weekend. Again, if you have questions, ask them through Facebook and we'll take care of those. Until next time, we'll try to do another one maybe here in a few month or two once we go further down the road with this House bill and see how things are going. All right?
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, you guys.